Welcome to another episode of the Walk the Line podcast. I'll be your host, Greg Stowers, and today we'll be joined by Tanner Bond. Tanner is a assistant coach for the Summit Page G-Nash hockey team. He's also a former Flyers player in the National Youth Organization, and he's a current MTSU player. Will be entering his sophomore year this upcoming season. How's it going, Tanner?
It's going good. How about you?
Doing well. Just want to say thanks for joining the podcast, and we'll get into a few different things, but I think it's always great to start at the beginning. So how Tanner get involved in hockey?
Well, I know you had my dad on the last podcast, and he kind of mentioned a few things before, but just going to Preds games whenever I was a kid, I started playing hockey and started in the goal program around age 4, age 5, and it really just took off from there. And something that a lot of people don't know about me is, I actually started as a skater, but then a few years in, I actually transitioned to goalie for about 4 or 5 years and then went back to skater. So that's kind of just a beginning. But, having Preds here locally really was just that jump starter for me. And, I just loved the game.
Yeah, well, so I didn't even know that you were a goalie at one point. What, you just did it like blocking shots, I guess?
No, I think I loved blocking the shots. That's why I had to hop in there. But some people around Nashville may know is Noah Brandow. He is now a goalie at Lawrence Tech. I believe they are D3 NCAA. But I was actually out there for one practice for I think it was I want to say a goal program practice or something like that, and I got off the ice mid practice and I was like, I want to go to goalie, and Noah's dad came to my dad and he's like, we have some extra gear that Tanner can try on and wear and jump out there. So mid practice went out there, and that's how the goalie journey started.
Yeah, we haven't had a goalie on this podcast yet, but they're definitely you have to be an interesting person to want to step in front of a 90-mile-per-hour shot. So might have made the smart decision on that one, sticking as a skater.
Yeah.
So I know we talked, and I should have mentioned that up before, but yeah, we had Kevin, Tanner's dad, on a previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen. He talks about the College Hockey Federation and MTSU and broadcasting their games. So it's a good episode if you haven't heard it yet. But back to Tanner. So, like your dad shared and you just shared, the goal program getting started, the Predators being a primary motivation for you to start skating and obviously getting involved with the game. But after you got your training wheels off, you became a Nashville Flyer. Now, when did you start playing for the Flyers?
So it was actually after A game shut down. I started playing goalie with the Storm, with the A game Storm. Big throwback to people who may or may not know about the Storm. But then the Storm became the Admirals, and then after A game shut down, I went to the Flyers for my last 5 years of youth hockey, I want to say. But it was a great program over there with the Flyers. I loved every team that I played on, and that was actually whenever I made my first jump to Double A my last 2 years. I never played Double A up until 18U, so that was a really cool experience for me. Like just seeing myself grow over the last few years with that Flyers program, and just the coaches that I had, they really helped me develop my game and, become more of the player I am today.
Yeah, it's definitely a great organization. It just keeps getting bigger and better, and they do it the right way. So for those who don't know, I'm also a Flyers coach. So I definitely have a slight lean in my preference. But so while you're with the Flyers, you also played for for G-Nash, correct? The league that your dad is
Yes.
now the commissioner of. What you were with Page, if I'm not mistaken.
I was so my first 3 years was Page Centennial. My senior year, I grandfathered into play for Centennial because they went Scholastic that year. And it was either play for Centennial or just go to Outlaws. And we had a few other players from page that were like, we don't want to go play for Outlaws, so we're going to go play for Centennial. We only had one page guy who went to go to Outlaws.
Hmm. And this next question will be kind of bleed into a few other topics here, but playing high school hockey, you have freshmen to seniors, on the same sheet of ice, all different skill levels, and as we've mentioned before, that the G Nash Hockey League is really improving, and a lot of good kids are coming out of there. But Tanner, you're not the biggest guy in the world. If you
Yeah.
could tell our listeners how tall you are, actually.
I'm 5'4", around 130, 135, maybe 140 on a good day.
Just a weapon out there.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, could you tell, and we'll talk about this in your college career as well, but being a smaller guy and playing the forward position, if you could share anything to maybe a younger kid who might not be the biggest, and if any takeaways that you've learned from being a smaller player, and like I said, you could be a 14-year-old kid playing high school hockey against a 6'4", 18-year-old. Just kind of if you could share some thoughts on being a small player in that high school hockey.
Yeah. I will definitely say whenever I first made that jump from, just playing regular travel hockey to then going to high school, my first game was against Brentwood. And if you know the G Nash League, Brentwood was always this top team. And that was the first team I played against in my high school career. So, they have all these big guys, and it's not an easy task. You see those guys lining up on the other side that are just towering over you. It's hard not to get intimidated. But from what I've learned and over my career is, I've always been that type of person, player that just I don't back down from anybody, whether they're 6'10", 6'11", or the same height as me. I don't back down. I go into those corners and I battle hard. But whenever I made that jump, I was a little hesitant, not even gonna lie. Like I got sat a little bit, but that made me just want to work harder. And for those guys that are making that jump now, it's this game is becoming more about speed than the physicality, and you got to find those advantages when you can. And if you're that smaller guy, you have to go in those corners and not be able to not back down from those guys, because those coaches will notice that and they will want you on their team every single time over that big guy who just knows how to throw a body. Like the game now, coaches don't want this guy who can just hit, and they want a guy who can move fast and beat defenders, but also will go in to corners and play against those big guys. So that's just my advice to any of those little guys that are going to be trying to go high in hockey.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see it at all levels, right? The NHL's changed, and obviously through the rule changes and all that stuff. But you don't have to, just because you're the small guy, whether you're a defenseman or a forward, it doesn't mean you can't go to that next level. You look at Johnny Gaudreau, and there's a bunch of names that we could rattle
Victor
off, but
Arvidsson.
Victor Arvidsson. I mean, the list goes on and on of smaller guys that can make an impact, and
Yeah.
you know and you can see it in the way you play, Tanner. It's just because you're small doesn't mean you don't have like the ability to make a physical impact. You don't, and you could talk about it too, but you don't have to be 6'4" to block shots or battle in corners, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another example, I was actually just talking to my dad about this guy a few weeks ago, Nathan Gerby, the smallest player in NHL history. He's actually my height, and he was out there. You look up Nathan Gerby highlights on YouTube, he lays big hits for a guy who's 5'4". So I mean, you want to watch guys in the NHL nowadays. He's not in the league anymore, but go watch Victor Arvidsson. You said Johnny Gaudreau. There's plenty of guys like that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I just a quick little Google search here. Cole Caulfield's the smallest player in the NHL right now. He's 5'7", 174 pounds. So it's like, don't be
Yeah,
discouraged if you're not the big guy. You can you just there's a role for everybody, and it's fine in your role, right?
yeah.
Um, so we'll kind of move on from your high school, um, and we'll move on to Middle Tennessee State University. Um, previously, Middle Tennessee was in the ACHA.
Yes.
2 years ago, I believe you all moved to the College Hockey Federation, which we talked about with Kevin an episode or so ago. So just if you could walk us through, the changes you've seen at MTSU and how that program is looking going forward.
Wow. I can already tell you the MTSU program it's going to be a team that teams need to look out for in the coming future. This past year was kind of a down year for us. But that was because we had a lot of change in the off season, and we had, you know, we didn't have a lot of guys in the first half of the season, me included. I was not there for the first half of this past season. So, the first semester they were skating with, maybe 12 guys a game or maybe nine. It just depends on the game. But, we've got a lot of recruits coming in that we can we feel confident in, and one of them is one you've already had on your podcast before, but has committed recently, is Zach Giblin. We're very excited to get him on the team now, and we still have a few other guys that we're looking at recruiting. But CHF in general, it's a growing league. My dad has talked about it to me, and the CHF is starting to become up there with the ACHA. Everybody thought club hockey you had to go ACHA, but the CHF is starting to make a name for itself. You got all these SEC schools in the league, and the teams are starting to be very competitive and could compete with those ACHA teams.
Yeah, and to kind of backtrack a little bit here, so for the listeners, I assisted with MTSU for a few years. And my first year was the 2018-29 season. I think I came in when Jason was still the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of change that's happened with that program from 2018 till now is incredible. When I first got there, I mean, it's a club sport, but we talk about, and Tanner can talk about it as well, but it's taken way more seriously than it has in the past, right? You guys now have these training groups in the summer, and you guys are sharing social media posts, and you guys are holding each other accountable to, like I said, when I started with the program, it was, some guys just wouldn't even show up for games. It was more of that recreational, let's just go have fun and play hockey. But as you can talk about, Tanner, it's incredible. It's a serious sport now. You guys are still paying to play, but you're all holding each other accountable, and it's only going to make that program grow stronger.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. The word we used was, this team used to be a glorified men's league team. That's how Nathan Wilson, who was our captain last year, described it, or Willie as we called him. But like, glorified men's league is how they described that team. I think this was before you too. But they would go on road trips, just drink and drink and drink, and they didn't even have a team bus yet. They just drove in vans or drove themselves to games, and they would get beat like 10-0 or worse every weekend. But that's not what happens anymore. Our team is, you mentioned the accountability stuff. Like, we have these accountability groups that we're all sending pictures into our group meet of like what we're doing that day, and we get points for whatever we do. And it's a really good system that we are all buying into right now.
Yeah, and I think kind of about the glorified men's league. When I first got there and started helping out, the practices were good, and there was skill there. Not to knock on the guys who have come through the program previously, but the way I was describing it to some people was it was football on skates. Essentially, it was, let's see who can make the biggest hit and make the crowd yell. Yeah. And now it's tons more skill. There's speed. I mean, you guys are getting light shows when you go at the Fordyce Center for your home games. Like, it's turning into the real deal. But kind of talking about how things have changed. Coach Jason was there previously, and then Tim Rathert took over. So you had the opportunity to play with Tim your freshman year, and obviously with a coaching change, there comes some push and pull between new guys and guys that were previously there. If you can, kind of touch on what that. And I don't know if you played with Tim in the past before, but kind of what your first year of college hockey experience was like?
Oh yeah, playing for Tim was, he's a great guy, great coach, and you can tell just by how he runs the team that he's been coaching for many years. And it's nice coach or playing under a coach like that because like they have a lot of knowledge that they can offer to you. And he had his son Jackson played on the team, and Jackson was a senior this past year, so now Tim said that he was going to step away after Jackson walked away, and we all thanked Tim and appreciated all the work he put into this team because I think like last year we made the college hockey South playoffs, and that wouldn't have happened without Tim. Like he made a drastic jump with the team, and we have him to thank for a lot of the stuff that we have
Yeah, I mean,
now.
he essentially revived the program, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he prepared for practices, game management, all the stuff you want in a coach. Definitely had the experience, and yeah, I mean, and even personally in my coaching career, I took things from him that I use in high school now, and um, you need those guys as programs progress to see how it can be done and what can be done better. So yeah, a lot of credit to Tim for making those changes and really improving this Middle Tennessee program. Um, there was one question I wanted to touch on. You're freshman, you're a smaller guy, and I was on the bench at the time as well during your freshman year. But you know, not every player gets to play as much as every other player, right? It's college
Hmm.
hockey. It's no ice time's guaranteed. It's you got to earn your ice, and you expressed some frustration, and it was obviously visible. But can you talk a little bit about your playing time your freshman year, and you know, well, let's just talk about your playing time your freshman year, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, yeah. So it started first games against Embry Riddle, um, my freshman year. It didn't go the way that we wanted, and for me personally, it didn't go the way I wanted to. And Tim talked to me after a game. He's like, that's not the same guy that we saw during the scrimmages in the off season, and that's not the same player that we saw during practices. And the next game against Embry Riddle, I'm a scratch, and that was the first time I had been a scratch ever, like healthy scratch.
Hmm.
Um, so that was a wake up call for me. And our next games were against Ole Miss. I sat the first game, and then I come back in the second game, and I began to see improvements in my game, and Tim started to see that I was putting in a little bit more work. Then we come back and play Vandy, and I'm a scratch again the first game, and then that second game against Vandy is when I really started to turn it around and really started to open up the eyes of the coaches and really show that I found my groove and I deserve to be in this lineup day in and day out. And that's something that I try and pride myself on is if I get discouraged, I'm not just gonna stay down. I'm gonna come back, and that was a big thing for me there because we went through a stretch of winning, I believe, 10 in a row before the Christmas break that my freshman year, and our that fourth line that I was on, we were rolling. We like Tim and you and JJ, you guys never felt like we were disadvantaged whenever we were out there. We were constantly keeping the puck in the offensive zone and keeping pressure on the other team. And, that was something that I took pride in was, I was the fourth line, but we were still getting the job done.
Right, and part of it's right. You want to be a net positive player when you're on the ice. So
Yeah.
and the plus minus stats is a little wonky, but you want your coach to be able to trust you, and it doesn't always mean you're going to go out and get a point or score a goal or something that reflects on the stat sheet. But you want to be a player that you're not going to turn the puck over in the defensive zone. Like if
Yeah.
you're tired and get a deep, get off for a change. So showing that you're that reliable player and can be trusted is a big part of earning that coach's trust and put you out in more of those situations where you can be that responsible player. But
Yeah.
the so your ice time is you're scratched for the first time. your ice time's not where you want it to be. You realize you got to, work hard and kind of prove yourself as a freshman. How did you kind of take that initial scratch? I mean, I've been scratched before, and it sucks, but there's a couple ways you can take that, right? You can pout and complain and call your parents and go to mommy and daddy and complain and do all that stuff, or you can get back to work and figure out how to fix it. Or what is something you did? I know you mentioned Tim talked to you, but is there anything that you could point out that you tried to do after that scratched game?
Yeah. You mentioned a big thing that I try not to do is I try not to let my parents handle my issues for me. I try and deal
Bravo,
with it
Tanner.
myself.
Good work. You don't need mom and dad emailing a college coach, but go on.
I try and deal with all the stuff behind the scenes on my own because that's my dad would say the same thing if I tried to get him to deal with it is this is your problem, you have to deal with it. And so that first scratch, I knew the best way to go about it was not to get down or anything. All I did was go to the game and I supported my team. I got behind the bench and I was still cheering them on and I was pumping them up whenever I could and pumping them up in the locker room, getting water bottles. And, everybody puts shame on the water boy and everything, but it's like, your teammates appreciate that.
Hmm.
Like, as much as you may not think, or as humiliating as you might think being water boy is, the teammates take notice of people who will do that for them. And, that's what I tried to do is I tried to be as supportive of the teammate as I could. And I think the coaches saw that. And then they also saw the work that I was putting in during practice. And that's really what came down to me, just getting back in that lineup consistently.
Yeah, you don't want to be the freshman on the team that's refusing to pick up pucks or fill water bottles or something.
Exactly.
That never goes a long way.
No.
So moving on to your sophomore year, then I think you took the first semester off. Can you share kind of
Correct.
what went into that decision and yeah, just share about that.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. My freshman year, I slacked with my grades. I got behind, and there's other things that happened personally, but I can't really sit here and make a bunch of excuses. You got to get the work done. You're playing a club sport. You're not getting paid to be there. I lost my scholarships because of my lack of like awareness and determination to get stuff done. And I took the semester off. I took the summer and fall off, and worked. I worked for a moving company because my dad said that'll make me never want to work there again. And he was right. I never want to
Yep.
do hard labor ever again.
Yep.
But it was a really big wake up call for me, and it really caused me to really buckle down and start to get my brain into this mode of needing to put in this work and wanting to see it pay off, because that payoff will be even greater and it'll be even more rewarding because you see all your hard work that you've put in and the drastic change you've overcome. And that's something that I really really have noticed. And I'm really grateful for not playing last semester because it really opened my eyes.
Yeah, I mean it was basically a reset, right? And we've talked
Yeah.
about it on previous podcasts is finding, what path is right for you, and no path is the right way. And, if you needed to take a semester off or whatever it may be, or not your case in particular, but, change teams or ask for a trade, whatever it is, you got to do what's right for you. And, now you're, in college, it's a little different, especially at the club level. You're somewhat tied into the school. You're paying for tuition and things like that. So it's if you don't figure it out, you might not be playing. So it's just I would kudos to you for being a man enough to just take that time off, get your head right, and hopefully this past was this spring semester the grades are a little better.
Mhm.
Are they a little better, Tanner?
Um, I'd like to think so, yes.
Okay. All right.
It's
Well,
kind of hard to be as bad as the previous year, but yes, they are definitely better.
okay. Shout out to all of our listeners. Your education is important. So
Yes, very much important.
um, but joking aside, it's even at that D1 level and D3 level, these teams have GPA minimums. So I believe MTSU does have one. You can tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know how well it's.
So
But
the
go ahead. Yeah.
CHF, the CHF has their minimum. Their minimum to play is 2.0. The minimum to stay enrolled, depending on your hours, my required GPA would be a 1.5 to stay in school, but to play it would be a 2.0 for CHS or CHF.
Got it. And I mean, it is tough. You're even though you guys only skate 2 times a week, but there's travel involved. Your weekends are taken away during the season,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you're working, and it's just like you got to find a way. And it's these things of playing a sport in college. It forces you to improve your
Yeah.
time management skills for sure. I mean, it's real world stuff. When you're done with school, you're getting a job, you have a wife or a husband, and eventually you might have kids. It's like you got to balance all that stuff. And if you want to do something extracurricular, you almost got to earn that. If you don't earn it, you got to focus your priorities on something else. So it's a good
Yeah.
life lesson for sure for you.
Yeah.
um look, go ahead if you had something.
Oh, my biggest like advice to people playing in high school right now is learn about time management now, because that's something that I didn't do. Is I didn't take the time to learn the time management then, and so that affected me whenever I got to college. So that's my biggest advice: is learn it now so that you can transfer it to college.
Well, yeah, and in college, right? You don't have a bus taking you to your classes. It's you got to get
Yeah,
there. You make the decision if you're going to class or not that day. And if you don't go to class, well, one, you'll fail because of attendance, and two, you'll probably fail because you're not sitting in the
yeah,
classroom and learning anything.
yeah. And once you miss one class, then you start to not want to go to the rest of your classes too. So it's just a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so we got through your first 2 years first 2 years at MTSU. You're coming up on another one here, being part of the College Hockey Federation. Is there anything you'd like to share about MTSU coming up next year? I know they got a new head coach, the former assistant coach JJ. So it's just it's essentially another reset, right? A new environment, a new head voice. Just talk a little bit about your excitement for next year.
Wow. Yeah, I'm super excited. JJ's not much older than some of the guys that we have playing for our team right now. Like, Ethan Roy, who's our goalie. JJ's, I believe, only 4 or 5 years older than Ethan. So, it's going to be nice to have a coach that's more our age. I think it lets us players relate to him more and lets us loosen up a little bit. And, he's played college hockey before. He played at West Virginia. And then you look at our assistant coach, who's our goalie coach too. You got Kent Nussbaum, who, for people who don't know, he's an e-bug for the Preds, but he also played in the ECHL. So he has high level experience. And for people who think goalie coaches are only for goalies, that's not necessarily true, because goalies see the most on the ice. Take it from me, who played goalie, and that's how I got. That's why I'm like a playmaker, as good as I am as a playmaker, because I see the ice better because I was in that goalie position. Goalies see the ice so well, and they have so much knowledge to give, and so that's a great asset for us to have, is have Kent back there behind our bench. And I think right now I don't know if the plan is if they're going to hire another assistant coach or not, but right now we're just rolling with Kent and JJ.
Yeah, and I think and Tim was doing it as well before JJ took over, but there wasn't much recruiting going on before Tim stepped in, right? I mean, now we have, I say we, like I'm still part of the team. Now you guys have, you're basically a GNAS college. You're getting guys from elsewhere too, but, guys are now in a position where they want to go to MTSU and play hockey. It's close to home. It's a good education. It's a state school. So it's, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm assuming it's somewhat cheaper. And, that they're out there at high school games and playoffs and the All-Star game, and they're setting up booths and stuff for those players to come and talk to them. So I think the fresh, you know, the freshmen that are coming in, it's only going to get better from there.
Yeah, you mentioned it is the state school and it being cheaper. Another thing is we're cheaper than UTK, like drastically cheaper. And so I don't want to speak for Gibby or anything, but I believe that was a big reason why he chose MTSU over the other schools that he had in mind was, it's cheaper. And it's local. And that's why we're getting a lot of these GNASH guys. And that's the biggest thing JJ wants to focus on is recruiting these local guys because they're the ones who are going to want to come to MTSU most likely because it's a local school. It's cheaper than all these SEC and big schools. And you're still getting good talent too. Like this GNASH league is growing so much. You talked about it with my dad on the last episode. The skill level that's in GNASH now is insane compared to what it used to be. And, they're kids that are still wanting to play hockey afterwards. So we're trying to take advantage of that.
Right, and I think Lyndon Palmer led the College Hockey Federation last year in points, if I'm not mistaken, and he was a prime example coming from GNASH, and now he's moved on to MTSU, and it's like if the kids are local and the hockey's getting better here, why not recruit in your own backyard? So it's just going to keep getting better, and it should be exciting to see what comes next for you guys. For those of you who don't know, MTSU plays at Fordyce Center, Antioch. Primarily Friday and Saturdays. Game times depend on what's going on at the rink.
Yeah.
But if you haven't checked out a game, they're free. So go out and check it out, and you can see Tanner buzzing around out there, all 5'4" of them. But just real quick, we'll touch on the College Hockey Federation. And again, I know we spoke about it with Kevin, but I think you have some news to share about your dad, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I believe it was about 3 days after he called me last Wednesday. I believe he said you guys recorded on Sunday, but he called me Wednesday and it was like, I want you to hear this from me. He's like, I got offered the assistant commissioner of the D3 CHF or CHS, and so that was big news, like very big news to hear from him. And it's like we said earlier in this podcast and in my dad's podcast is this league is growing like drastically, and it's taken another big step is Kyle Nell, who's the CHS commissioner. He's run the league by himself for like ever since it started, and so now he's bringing in, I believe my dad said, around 17 board members now. So it's taken a huge leap this year.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, obviously it's competing against the ACHA, and we don't have to get into all the reasons why there's a College Hockey Federation and the ACHA's, there as well. So, but no, it's growing, it's getting bigger and better, and you got those big name schools, the UGAs, the UTs, Vandy, like it's only getting better as time goes on here. So we talked about it before we hopped on, Tanner, and I'm putting you on the spot, and maybe you thought of something, maybe you didn't, but I asked Zach Giblin the same thing. So if you could share one thing that a teammate, a coach, maybe one of your parents told you that kind of stuck with you, and we have a lot of younger listeners, and obviously you starting hockey in Nashville and going through the ranks, and now you're MTSU. Is there anything, whether it's a quote or advice that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think actually the more I thought about it, the easier this answer became for me was, growing up playing hockey, you just love the game so much, and it's hard not to take it very serious sometimes and just be very competitive. And there's nothing wrong with being competitive and taking it serious, but I think you got to draw the line sometimes. And you're playing this game for a reason because you love it, and you'll see a lot of guys burn out because they take it too serious and they stop enjoying the game. So my biggest advice is just enjoy the game, because the more you enjoy it, the better you're going to be, and the more you're going to enjoy working out and working on your game and perfecting your skill set. If you take it too serious and everything, you're just going to burn out like all the rest of the people. Don't take it
Right.
too serious. Enjoy the game while you can. Enjoy the memories you have while playing with your travel teams. Like those are the fondest memories I have is the hotels on travel weekends. Like those are the most fun, and it's the most fun now for MTSU. Our travel weekends on the bus and hotels, like that stuff you'll never get back. So enjoy it, and then the game will come from there.
Right. And it's like you said, it's meant to be fun, and it'll happen at some point in everybody's career. Is one day you go to the rink and you're thinking to yourself it's not fun right now, and then you got to figure out how to change that. Whether it's your own mindset, maybe you got to work a little harder, or maybe it's not the right fit for you. So,
Yeah,
just to all the listeners, just make sure you're having fun and you're enjoying it.
yeah,
I want to add to that real quick is just because you're not playing does not
yeah,
mean it's time for you to pout. And it's, always look at yourself in the mirror first,
yeah,
and see what you can change before you start thinking about draft decisions.
yeah.
Well, Tanner, is there anything else you'd like to add? I know I kind of went through a good bit of your playing career. You know what? Actually, let's talk about this. You're an assistant coach with Summit Page, and we
Yeah.
haven't talked about that much yet. This being this past season, your first year, and um, you have a lot. You had a lot going on. You were working, going to school, playing. So didn't make it to all the games, but
Yeah.
uh, can you just talk a little bit about being behind the bench, and has it helped you as a player on the ice at all?
100% it has. It's kept me out of a box.
There you
Um,
go.
our team was the most penalized team in all of GNAS last year, so we don't
Hmm.
really take too much pride in that. But you talked about it last podcast, being suspended twice, not really any of your own doing, but because the players couldn't keep their mouth shut.
Hmm.
It's something that I had a problem with going into coaching is, I was this passionate player and I would always run my mouth to the refs or to other players or coaches and, you know, coaching and watching MTSU, I saw that and I was like, I'm going to transfer into my own game and try and dial back and keep myself in check. And it helped. But, coaching was a lot of fun, seeing all these kids and some of these kids I'm actually going to be playing with this next year, like Caden and Jacob. And, hopefully Mason Breedlove decides to come to MTSU. Um, Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But, it was a cool experience to do. And I'm still trying to decide what I want to do coaching wise. And, I definitely think coaching Summit Page another year would be very interesting for me. But you always have to wait day by day and see what comes up.
Right. Well, we'd love to have you back. We could talk about that offline and figure
Hmm.
that out. But got a few months before that decision needs to be
Yeah.
made. But no, Tanner, I think you hit a lot of points on the head here. You're being a small player, and kind of how you adjusted to compensate for that. And we talked about your playing time. So I think there's a lot of good stuff that our younger listeners can pull from it. And I think it'll be a good episode for a lot of players out there. So just wanted to thank you for your time and coming on the Walk the Line podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. I definitely enjoyed it and definitely hopefully have me back in the long future because I'm looking forward to seeing the guests you get in these next few episodes too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and good luck to MTSU next year, and I'm sure I'll see you around soon. But you have a great rest of your week, all right?
You too, Greg.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
Once again, I'd like to thank Tanner Bond for joining the Walk the Line podcast. Hope our listeners out there enjoyed listening to some of his stories, talking about MTSU, being a smaller player, and how he adjusted to not getting as much ice time as he desired. So, again, thanks to Tanner for coming on. And if anybody else has any other topics that they would like to hear discussed on the Walk the Line podcast, please email 307sports.hockey@gmail.com. Thanks and have a great weekend, everybody.